If you run a contact center or business process outsourcing, you know the pain. Customers repeat themselves, average handling time, AHT creeps up, and your AI can't remember anything. Today's guest, Hakob Astabatsyan, CEO of Synthflow, the Berlin voice AI platform backed by Excel, just launched memory for voice agents, so AI can keep context across calls at sub-second latency inside your existing CRM telephony stack. In the next few minutes, you'll unpack how memory turns conversational AI into enterprise infrastructure. So you/costs lift FCR and stop making customers repeat their story.
Welcome to Startuprad.io, your podcast and YouTube blog covering the German startup scene with news, interviews, and live events.
Our guest today is Hakob Astabatsyan, co-founder and CEO of Synthflow, the enterprise voice AI platform out of Berlin that's scaling like few others. The company powers human-like phone conversation for 1,000+ customers, serves 100+ enterprises, integrates with 200+ tools from telephony to CRM, and runs at sub-second latency with 99.9% availability. In 2025, Synthflow raised $20 million Series A, led by Excel, cementing its position among the world's top AI agent platforms, recognized by G2 for customer satisfaction, fast implementation, and best ROE, return on investment. Today, we dive into Synthflow's newest capability, memory, the Bell framework. Let's voice agents remember details, preferences, and unresolved cases across sessions, support seamless human handoff, and even share state via memory groups across multiple agents. If you've tried AI in your call center and hit the context wall, this episode is for you. Hakob will take us from pilots to global rollout, how to deploy, measure, and govern memory-enabled voice AI without adding risk. Hakob, welcome to Startup Radio.
Hey, John. Thanks for having me here. Glad to be here.
Before we get started, for a little bit older people, I was wondering, you remember Space Odyssey, where the AI hell goes crazy and tries to kill all the people. Did you have at any moment the intention also to have a hell mode in your voice agents?
Yeah, it's a good question. Actually, when we started building this in the early 2023, everyone was talking about AGI, right? The first version of GPT came and everyone was saying, oh, now you're just going to click one button and AI is going to do everything. And then everyone, there were like scandals everywhere. Like people were warning against AI. But I think in the last 2 years, everyone came to this realization, actually, the LLMs are not that smart as we thought, right? I mean, it's an incredible progress, what we had, right? But I think everyone realizes there is also as much as this technology can do, and we are actually very far away from that AGI. So I think the expectations are way lowered right now, and we're entering into this phase of soberness, right? After this excitement and euphoria, I think people are becoming sober in being realistic. What can actually this AI do? And the same applies to the voice AI, right?
Mm-hmm. I also realized that in science fiction, there have been always the mean AIs. Think about Skynet, but I do believe simply for the reason they make way better stories. Different topic. So, let's take us to the start, like not necessarily when you founded the company, but the original spark. And what was the moment you may remember when you conceived the original spark for Synthflow, and when did it click that voice AI agents needed to be infrastructure, not just smart stuff?
Yeah, very good question. Actually, we started experimenting with LLMs around like March 2023. This is when the first, I would say, proper version of GPT was released with an API that you could start working with. And everyone was building like text bots on this LLM, basically this wrapper around LLM, right? And then you would have a text bot. And for us, the first idea was that we wanted to build a no-code layer so that business folks could interact with it, right? Because this was like a lot of developers, and in developer forums, everyone was trying to work with the API, but we also wanted to have this no-code layer. And we built the first version, like for chatbot. And I think it was around summer of 2023, like few months after the release of GPT, that the first ideas of this voice orchestration started resurfacing on internet, right? And the orchestration idea is actually very simple. You take the speech of a human, you convert it to text, right? You do some work there, and then you send it to LLM, this text. LLM gives you an answer back, right, in a text form. Then you take this text, do a couple of things, and then convert it back to speech. And you do it and you have to do it very fast, right? So that you play back the answer to the human. So that's where latency comes into game. And this was the first orchestration. Everyone, not everyone, but like I would say few teams actually, because it's very hard thing to do. Text is easy, right? But voice was very hard. And we started building this orchestration. And I remember like around end of the summer of 2023, we had the first version that you could talk on the phone. And it was terrible, right? If I look back, it was terrible, the first version. And it would like wait for 2 seconds to answer, right? For example, right now when we talk, we have 400 milliseconds of latency, humans. We're perfect because the moment you interrupt me, I immediately process it and stop, and then vice versa. That's why we can have such a fluent conversation together. But it was not the case for AI, right? It would pause for a long time. And then when you would start speaking as a human, it would speak over you, right? At some point, you just hang up as a human, right? This was the very first version. But it was an interesting revelation for us because we realized this is a very hard problem to solve. And it's really worth it investing our time. And because the demand was very high for this, right? And then we started working on this, and we released in early 2024. So we worked 6 months on this. We released the first version, which is way worse than what it is right now, right? But it was already pretty good. And this is where we actually started commercializing. We had our first customers, and we started iterating with them. And since then, basically, the technology has been progressing very fast, right? New LLMs have been coming out, and a lot of infrastructure around this orchestration has developed, like DeepGram, speech to text and all this kind of solutions. And at some point, I think in 2025, early 2025, I think the entire voice industry crossed the chasm of actually voice. Because if you asked me in the early days, I was still not sure if this is actually going to be a technology that humans will be actually adopting on mass, on scale. But this year we passed that chasm, fortunately, and it's just being now deployed in production like all around the world. Yeah.
I was also experienced that from a very different perspective. For example, member of a few platforms where you can book voice over talent, and I've realized that the number of requests are going way down, and a few still pop up where you basically hand over your voice until eternity to an AI, which is not necessarily attractive for people who make a living from that. Can you paint the reality of contact centers, business process outsourcers, pre-memory? What do AHT, so the average handling time, or the first contact resolution, also called FRC, or the CSAT, customer satisfaction course, and call deflection typically stall without the persistent contact? So how did it work before your memory introduction? And to all of our audience, yes, we have TLAs, 3-letter acronyms.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's a specific industry with specific acronyms. Look, so I think before LLMs, like the way all these conversations were handled is through IVR trees, right? So you would call, like, I don't know, I used to experience that a lot in Germany. I would call like insurance company or whatever, and they would say, if you want to ask a question about your financial thing, press 1. If you want to talk to customer support, press 2, right? So you would have to go, and then you would go into wait line and wait forever. So it was actually a terrible experience for humans, but sometimes you just didn't have a choice, right?
And I vividly remember they gave you, for example, when you talked to an insurance hotline in the beginning, they gave you options where you had totally no clue where you fit in, and you had to try through all the menus. Yeah, it was a really bad experience. And then it asked you, would you still like to stay online? And you yelled, yes. And it said, I understood. No, I'll hang up now. That was level of experience, right?
Yes, exactly. And it was like a lot of NLP, NLU technology involved there, sometimes capturing information. I mean, it was a very basic technology, right? And the human experience, it was not built for human experience. It was built for just doesn't matter. Your experience doesn't matter, but at least we will get something solved, right? Rather than never solved. So it was like sort of like the mantra was better late than never, sort of. And but it was the state of the technology, right? And now, right, with this conversational AI, the thing is that now it's all about experience as well, right? Results, but also experience, right? It's not like, oh, I just reduced my deflection rate or I just increased my resolution time, but what you just mentioned, CSAT, right? The satisfaction score. This is very, very important, right? So when we started building Synthflow, actually for us in the beginning, it was all about customer experience. So this is the only thing we cared about, right? Like, how is your experience with AI, right? Are you having a good conversation, right? And that's why, the entire industry tries to build this empathy into AI, right? Better voices. So the early feedback was many voices are robotic, right? And then you try to build more empathetic voice, right? And all these things is all about human experience. Ultimately, it's all about humans here, right? And then the second stage of the technology, when we started working with contact centers, of course, they have to have clear, as you mentioned earlier, ROE, return on investment. And this is where is the second part of the conversation, right? When you have a conversation with voice AI, the first part is the experience, the voice experience. The second part is the RPA, right? This business process automation. Like what is the work that AI does, right? Does it answer your question? Does it route you to a human? Does it send you an SMS with some information? Whatever the job of the AI is, it has to be done, right? Because only that way the contact centers can measure the success. And this is what we measure at the Synthflow. For us, the most important KPI for our customers is that they get their results, ROE, but also the end customer, right? The person on the phone has to have an amazing, great experience, because the entire purpose of this technology is in vain if people don't have a great experience with this.
Totally, yeah. Exactly. I was wondering what feedback, what signals, or any other input did you receive from your customers that you had to prioritize this multi-turn memory over adding yet another feature? Because looking back now, it does make sense. But if you do have to make the decision, let's do A, B, C, D, E, how did you decide, and decide based on what?
Mm-hmm. So the way we build our product is always based on our customer feedback, right? We talk to our customers and we try to understand what is important for them. That's one. And second, we always try to understand, is it feasible, right? Because as I mentioned earlier, right, when this technology came, everyone was expecting AGI, right? Like general intelligence, and you just click one button and everything gets done. And then I think suddenly everyone woke up to the reality that the context is everything. What is the context, right, of the agentic? Like, where is the data? What does it have to do? And this is for our customers, right? Being like in a B2B context, right? Basically, you can think of Synthflow like an AI contact center, right? The whole purpose of doing a work end to end, right? AI has to do a work end to end. What I mean by that, think about if someone calls and wants to get some number sent, right, or some information sent per SMS, right? If the AI has a good conversation but doesn't send that SMS to the customer, then the job is not done, right? The action is not executed. So this is where we started working, right? And you need like memory and you need context, right, for AI to be able to do the job. And for large companies, enterprises, very often it needs that Synthflow agents have to be integrated into their existing tech stack ecosystem, right? Maybe they use one telephony system, right? They have their own CRM and they have whatever they have that agentic AI, Synthflow agents have to interact with, right? So that they can actually resolve customers' problem end to end. Was the key, right? Otherwise, you don't have that ROE we just mentioned. And this was the reason.
They're just an interaction layer. They make the data from your customer, meaning their tech stack, their problems, their interaction. They make it feasible. They're just a layer of interacting instead of sitting there and trying to navigate through the systems.
Exactly, but it also does. It also navigates, right? So you can think of it like basically it's like a knowledge base, right? Like existing knowledge base, like you connect it to the agents. And when the agent interacts with the customer, it has the information that it needs to answer customers' questions or send information or even capture. Sometimes it's the other way around, right? The agent captures an information from customer and sends it to the CRM, right? To the existing CRM and updates, let's say, the database with the data, right? So it can go both way. Either it shares information with the customer or it gets the information from the customer and saves in the existing database, right? And without the context, right, all this ecosystem, the agent is basically, it's a demo, right? It will not be able to do an end-to-end work that humans do nowadays. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We talked about the latency, that it's below a second, sub-second latency, and like having really persistent sessions, not that it's interrupted and it's not useful anymore. So what was the hardest challenge there from an engineering standpoint to get this workable?
Yeah, it's a very good. So actually, latency was the number one problem when folks started building voice AI, because by following that orchestration, right, like the speech to text and text to speech, right, you had to do it. It was very rudimentary. The first version that was built, it was very basic, right? And also, like, everyone was building, it was like almost for demos. So you were just trying to optimize it for one call, etc. But the problem became really complicated, right, when we started growing very fast. We started growing very fast, and imagine like processing millions of calls every month, or hundreds of thousands, like tens of thousands per day. And all these calls together, you have to make sure that your entire infrastructure, right, can support that. And there are also like so many factors that can affect latency, right? It could be related to telephony, it could be related to connectivity. It could be related to even how you set up the agent, right? And it was basically, but we realized that this is the number one challenge to solve. Without this, like, nothing really matters in this business. And what we did is we hired engineers who have been specialized in this area, and we have a team in Synthflow that's called like it's basically our infrastructure team that only works on these topics, right? They work on reducing the latency, they work on improving the interruptions. And then at some point, it's basically two components that affect this. One, it's an empirical work, right? You constantly collect data, you constantly improve your system and infrastructure. And the second is like how you build your architecture, right? Which vendors do you use? Which LLM do you use, right? How do you send the data between A and B? So there's a lot of also architectural decisions you have to make so that when you start scaling this, it doesn't break. Because everyone that works in voice AI knows how hard it is to ensure reliability when you process millions of calls. I always bring this example. I say it's similar or anecdotal example could be for folks who work at the airport and have to ensure that the planes land safely, right? One like kind of coordinators. And of course, if you do this job well, no one talks about this, right? But if you do one mistake, it's a huge disaster, right? Everyone will, and the stakes are very high in our business as well, right? You can process million calls and it's expected, but let's say 100 calls break, right? Something happens, suddenly people or contact centers panic, right? Because I don't know, there's something about calls that people get really angry when these things don't go through, right? It's not the case with text bots. Sometimes people get frustrated and close it and go, but there's something about calls that people like make huge buzz around this, like they close down operations and this, and that's why like reliability is basically we print it out and put it on the wall at the office for our engineering team in the early days. This is the most important thing we have to solve in the very beginning. Yeah.
Did you ever talk to psychologists why it is that voice and calling is so special here?
I haven't talked to, but I have read about similar kind of concept. It's basically psychologists call it anthropomorphism, which means that humans have this tendency to attribute human qualities to machines or non-living things, right? Also, you see it like in children books, etc. When animals talk, robots become humans' friends, and there is an empathy, right? So there is definitely an anthropomorphism, which means humans in the beginning have this tendency to be creeped out when the technology machine behaves like human. It scares humans, right? So there is an adoption window for humans actually to get used to it, right? So it has been with many technologies. Like for us, everything we use is normal, right? The phones and laptops and everything, but the folks that saw it for the first time in their lives, right? There is always some, I would say, adoption time needed to get used to this technology. It was same thing with voice AI, right? People thought this is like dangerous. This is, I don't know, it's weird that the AI speaks like human, right? But that's why I was saying this year we crossed the chasm, because right now, like there's a large amount of humans that are actually used to it or already had their first experience talking to AI. And there were so many like, I always bring this example of this movie called Her, right? When Joaquin Phoenix is talking to the AI, right, all the time. It's like a human, and I think humans have also been prepared for this a little bit through popular media, etc. But it's still like in the early days. I remember it was very hard to make certain type of calls. Yeah.
Those people who warn about something, I vividly remember that I once read there were doctors recommending not to travel by train because they thought it would be harmful to the human body to move faster than a horse ride.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so we've seen that. Let's be a tiny bit geeky here. Talk about here. What did you try that didn't work when building memory? Prompt-only hacks, external key value stores, native retrieval, augmented generation, and what replaced it?
Mm-hmm. Look, so the very first I would say, approach was put everything. So if we go back to the very beginning, right? Even to chatbots, right? So it was the RAG, right? Like you connect a knowledge database, right? But in some situations, in some context, I would say it's for especially in the enterprise situations, each situation was different, right? Each situation was different. Each document was different that you had to reference, right? So there was some complexity involved to make it work for each, especially for the enterprise. And then I think there was a moment where we solved this by having the prompt, right? You have the prompt field, and everything that agent needs to know is within the prompt, the open prompt way, right? And you just paste it there, and the information is there. But of course, there is also a limit there how much you can put, because if you put too much, right, if the text is huge, that also increases the probability of hallucinations, right? Basically, think about it. The more information you give to AI, there are more paths that the AI can go in the conversation, right? So it increases basically the probability that it can deviate or it can get confused from the main thing that you set the AI to do, right? And I would say honestly, the answer is it depends, because right now we have that, like the open prompt thing, but we also just released the Bell framework, and one of that Bell framework, the first one called Build, is the flow designer. So the flow designer allows you, like, it's a visual graph that you can build the conversational paths, right? And with that, we want to address the cases where you really know what the AI needs to do, right? Imagine you just hired an intern, right? You don't want that intern to go freestyle, right? You know your business. You just sit down and explain 1 hour and say to the intern, look, this is the script. This is what you say in the call, right? And this is what you don't say in the call, right? And I want you exactly to follow this, right? And this is like, and you can create it. The benefit of this, it's very deterministic. It reduces the hallucinations. It puts guardrails into place. And basically AI does the job that it has to do. If for the open prompt version, right, when you basically just paste the same way you prompt GPT, right? You don't build the graphs, but you just prompt it. This is better if you want to keep it more open-ended, the conversation. If you want to keep the conversation more open-ended, right, you can give it some instructions, but you also hope that AI would freestyle a little bit, right? The same way you spend some time with GPT and you just want it to give also creative answers, right? So I think having that's why we built both, right? So that our customers can kind of have more deterministic for more specific cases, especially in B2B context. Determinism is actually very much appreciated nowadays. And of course, you can also leave it a bit more open-ended if your use case is such you don't want it to do exactly that way. And this is like the spectrum that we leave actually our customers to choose how they kind of create that instructions and memory. Yeah.
You just talked about leaving your customers choices. Where do they get burned by AI, or did get burned by AI voice promises, guardrails, evaluation, handoffs, or security, and how do you de-risk them?
Yes, that's an excellent question, right? It's basically for enterprises and contact centers in B2B context, right, where ROE is everything. Risk has been the biggest challenge. And basically, think about early days of agentic AI is you build the agent and you hope it will work. You hope it will do what you want it to do, right? It's a hope. You just launch it, and then suddenly you come and see it didn't do what you wanted to do, and then you iterate with it, right? It's very similar when you chat with GPT. You ask a question, it doesn't answer, and you go back and say, "Dear ChatGPT, my question was this and this. Please be very right." You just you push back a couple of times until you get exactly what you need to do, and it was very similar, right? And we said, look, we have to solve this. We can't leave it. We can't leave it to a chance, right? These things, and that's where we started working on Bell framework, which is like build, evaluate, launch and learn. The entire idea of that framework is we wanted to de-risk enterprise deployments, right? It means you can build more predictable conversational paths with this designer. We build for evaluate part, we build simulations, right? It means you don't have to go and call real people to see if AI does what you want to do. You can do it with synthetic data. You can simulate it in the same environment before you actually release it. So it's way faster and way safer, right? And then there is like the versioning part, right? Maybe you want to have a couple of versions, right, that you want to test. And lastly, you want to do some auto QA and analytics, right? So basically we created an environment within Synthflow for customers, enterprises, where they can go and they can do all the work there in a very safe environment, make sure that the agent does what they actually intended to do, and only then they release it to the public. And we have been working for this for many, many months, and we're releasing right now, and that's the entire purpose, is de-risking and accelerating actually the deployment of these agents. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We also going to record a Founders Vault episode after this one, and there you'll tell us about the toughest enterprise deployment and where you failed initially, what broke in production and who escalated and who you salvaged it. Let's talk about your current playbook and how to move from a pilot to production in weeks. Team setup, no code versus API, and the first 3 workflows you always target.
Yes. So look, basically the older technology required a lot of human touch, right? And like especially the NLP, NLU technology, people would have to go understand, map out the conversation, and then go and build it, right? With Synthflow approach, we build this layer, no-code layer, that allows customers to basically follow like 3-4 steps, and you actually have your agent, right? So integrations is a bit different thing. This is where our forward deployed engineers work with the customer to integrate, especially on the telephony side and other tech stack like CRMs, etc. We integrate with an API or with SIP trunking, basically. But once that work done, and this can be done very quickly, basically within few days or weeks, depending on the case. But the agent creation part is very straightforward. So we have reduced it to an absolute minimum and basics, right? You have to prompt, or with a visual graph builder, you just have to build a conversation, right? And then you have to choose an action that AI has to do. You can also build a custom action if you don't have that. And then you can always leverage the Bell framework for that, right? To test everything, etc., before you deploy, and then you can actually go live. So we have simplified it to the, I'll say, to the limit, right? And so it's very easy actually to do, and we continuously building new things around that, so that we take out this, I would say, this complex part from agents, right? So that it becomes almost like a deterministic thing you do. You just go, you build it, and it works, right? That has been the whole idea. And in terms of use cases, right, the most common ones or workflows that we see across the board, we see a lot of transfer case, right, where AI is the first line of defense, and then it weeds out the irrelevant calls, right, and forwards the important ones, which actually reduces the workload with humans. We see a lot of customer support, or in other words, I love to call it FAQ, right? AI answering a lot of questions, right, for customers, which are very basic. So humans don't have to waste time on that. AI can answer all this. It's very solid. There is also like a lot of qualification is happening, right? AI reaching out to humans, asking a couple of things and qualifying and booking next steps, basically. These are like very common, widespread cases we see in our, right, B2B AI contact center case, mainly on the phone, right? Yeah.
Talked about those KPIs? Can you share some specific numbers, typical containment, the reduction in average handling time, the lift in first call resolutions, meaning the customers only need to call once, or human hour savings that you're comfortable stating by vertical?
Mm-hmm. Look, there are no single numbers, right? It's very much depends on the customer and the use case, right? So, for example, we have how complicated the case is, right? For example, we have one customer in healthcare, and they basically benchmark AI with the work that human does today, right? In terms of like deflection rate, right? So, and I don't remember what the exact number was. Let's say 17 or 18%, whatever the number is. Basically, that customer says if AI, even like 1, 2, 3 percentage points better than this, that's already a big win, right? Because humans' time is more valuable than AI's time, right? AI is 24/7, it's cheap. You can just put it there and it can do the work, right? The only reason you wouldn't put AI if it's significantly worse in terms of ROE than humans, right? Then you still justify. But if AI is even slightly better, so for example, in that particular case, they were targeting 20% plus rate, then they went with AI, and the human basically moves one step back and takes important calls that are a bit more complicated. Maybe they are more of an emotional nature, or there is a complicated things that they have to do afterwards, right? So that's what we're seeing, right? In other cases, for example, if someone does an outbound campaign, right, and does like 1,000 calls, even if you get, I don't know, 5, 6 calls answered, it could be a big win, depending what's your case, right? Maybe each call can result in a lead that can result in tens of thousands contracts for you afterwards, right? It's a big win. But maybe you call 1,000 times and everything less than 500 answers is already bad, right? And then in some cases AI works, in some cases it doesn't make sense, right? The ROE. The simplest things to measure are more like, I would say, the cases that I mentioned, right? Let's say the transfer and etc. These things are very easy to measure, and in some cases you see marginal improvement, right? AI is several percentage points better, and it's already a good case, right, to put AI because of the cost savings. But sometimes we also have customers who never had anyone there. So they didn't even have resources, and just putting AI results in 80% improvement in time reduction, for example, right? Like some crazy numbers, because they never had that, right? They didn't have the resource, and now they just put AI and it does something that was never being done. And there you see like very like large numbers as an improvement.
For our audience, if you run a CX or BPO, what's the one place you'd want voice AI memory like tomorrow? Bookings, claims, returns, tech support? Drop it in the comments. By the way, if there's anything interesting, Hakob, of course, we'll share it with you. Let's talk a little bit about the framework. What's your memory read-write policy framework? What to store, for how long, with what consent, and what controls?
This is a very important question, right? We touched upon anecdotally before, like why are phone calls so dramatic, right? Have such a dramatic impact on humans, and it's also same in terms of compliance, right? So, for example, there is a HIPAA compliance in the US or GDPR compliance in Europe, and we as a Synthflow, very early on in our journey, invested significant resources of our company actually to undergo all these compliances, right? SOC 2, Type 2, GDPR, HIPAA. And for example, with HIPAA compliance, right, there is the toggle bar in our tool that our customers disable so that the calls don't get recorded, because certain types of calls in certain regions you're not allowed to record, right? So in GDPR, right, for example, the data hosting is a very important thing, right? And so calls are very sensitive, and we always work very closely with our customers, right? So that we ensure we sign like BAAs with our customers, right? Business associate agreements. We have basically right now on the Synthflow website, there's a trust vault that you can access. And we have all sub-processing agreements, BAAs. We take this topic very seriously because in some industries, and I would say in many cases, like the data storage and recordings is a very sensitive topic, and it has to be 100% compliant. This is very important in our market.
I was wondering, for callers who get interrupted, switch or something, how do you maintain your context coherence and avoid hallucinated calls? For example, you call for your VW Golf and actually they tell you, yes, your Bentley is ready.
Yeah, that's a very good question, right? And this comes back to the point, right? It's also like kind of the idea of Bell framework is we want to make sure, right, the customers can build more deterministic agents if its topic is sensitive, right? So for example, you can leave the AI agent a bit open if it has to answer like, I don't know, some low stake situations. Let's say like hypothetically has to say what's the weather or something like that, right? But if it's about the order or golf and Bentley, right, you want to use the visual graph builder that we built, because that way you completely eliminate the hallucinations, right? Because that's what we've built. It's a very deterministic environment, right, that doesn't allow AI to deviate from your. If you know as a Volkswagen, basically that this is exactly what customer is going to ask, and this is exactly what the AI should answer, this is the right way to go, right? And then, of course, you just simulate this, you QA this before actually releasing this. This is very important, right? And we have invested a lot of resources in building the Bell framework so that our customers, these enterprises, can actually serve these use cases. And I can go one step deeper and tell you it's even more important in financial industry, for example, right? You cannot quote a wrong percentage or etc., right? So you have to adhere to the things. And the short answer, basically, you reduce the hallucinations through graph builder and, of course, the simulations and versioning in QA.
That is great. Guys, right after the ad break, Hakob will unpack the deployment blueprint Synthflow uses to get memory-enabled agents live in under 30 days, plus one mistake that kills ROI. Guys, welcome back after our short ad break. Hakob, can you walk us through the 30-day deployment blueprint from data mapping and integration selection to evaluating metrics and blue-green rollout?
Definitely. So the way we work with our customers is in the very first step, we try to understand the use case and the value that the customers seek to get out of this technology, right? Because there is a lot of noise around AI, and we want to make sure that our customers have the right expectations from this technology, and we can actually deliver them in a promised time frame. Once we have done this part, we actually get into a working period with customers where we help them with integrations, right? We advise them on a lot of topics. Our forward deployed engineers stay very close to the customers, and we advise them on a lot of things, like, for example, on the agentic part, we demo them the Bell framework so that they can deploy this in a de-risked way, but also we help them integrating this into their existing ecosystem, right? Especially many customers have their own telephony system, and we have to integrate into that with the SIP trunking. And there are a lot of nitty-gritty details sometimes. And our forward deployed engineers work with them to make that happen. And generally during this period, we do these parts, and the customers would go live and start testing, right? And then they will get their KPIs they want, right? And this would be like a success. But right now with the Bell framework, that's not even needed to go to live. They can even do it like in a more controlled environment, and we even expect to reduce this more, right? But that's generally like roughly how we work with our customers to make sure actually they get out of this technology what they want to.
You've been talking about the nitty-gritty details, and that's usually where you win or lose in the startup game. Walk us through growth methodology, Bell framework. How do you scale from one use case to 5? What's the sequence that compounds return on investment?
Yes. So I think the very first step for us scaling the business, the first challenge we started facing once we scaled was the volume, the infrastructure, right? Basically, we were a startup of a couple of folks, and then basically in a few months, we started processing millions of calls on the platform. And it was very unexpected. So we had to do a lot of infrastructure investments and expansions to be actually able to process this. And the way we scale this is we generally are very selective in work with whom we work, right? That's why we do this step one. What I mentioned earlier is we always try to understand the customer's expectations from this technology and kind of have the same expectations, right? So that we can actually help customer to get there. But the work on our side is more like consultative and being as a sparring partner for the customer. So it doesn't require large headcount on our side to work with our customers. And we have built the product in a very scalable way, and we continue doing that, right? We released the Bell, but then we also are cooking a couple of very advanced features, which I'll not talk about today, but we are going to release soon in the future. And basically, we'll scale it with the product, right? So there is no like an inherent, I would say, limit to why our platform at this moment, right, cannot process hundreds of millions of calls instead of millions of calls, right? And this is how we want to continue at this moment. Of course, we have to grow our team. It's natural as a company, as we grow and the revenue grows and the usage, we have to build different departments and be better, also offer better service to our customers. But there is no, I would say, like a fundamental blocker to scale this business for us at this moment.
I've seen some logic sprawl in such projects. How do you recommend no-code ownership versus ops versus API for engineering, and what governance prevents this logic sprawl?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would say, of course, the API gives more flexibility, right? And I would say for smaller cases, right? So we have two, I would say, maybe you can say like two types of customers, that one type would prefer the no code, the other type would prefer the API. So let's say one of our customers, a very large contact center, a BPO, they basically use the API because they integrate Synthflow into their operations, basically into their entire tech stack, so that they can offer voice AI to their customers, right? So it's like a white label integration there. And of course, the API is the way to go there because they want to expand on this massively. But if there is, let's say for smaller customers, right, if you have one particular use case in mind and you want to quickly build this, it's very easy to go and build with the no-code layer you have there, because it's just click, right? And you have the case. But we also have built some sophisticated features there. It's called like multi-tenant, basically portal, where you can become the owner and you can have many users invite your team members and have sub-accounts, right, for different use cases. And we have many customers who just chose this way, right? Because it's simpler, it requires less engineering resources, and it's more than enough for their particular case. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You do have some case studies on your website, MedBell, SmartCat. What ingredients made those outcomes work?
Yeah, so I think So one important thing is that this initial period that we actually are close to our customers, right? We understand, we set their expectations right, we help them define the outcomes that they want to get. Very often customers know it themselves, but if they don't, they're more explorative. We help them understand that. And once it's done, then the rest is all about the right integrations and the right agentic part, the right agent setup, right? So the agent setup we have simplified to minimum. But there still could be some questions. Do I go with the visual graph builder or do I prompt it myself? But of course, our customer support is always there to answer customers' questions. But the integrations part, this is something that often we sometimes have to share something like our documentation or etc., so that they can integrate into their telephony system. Or if they don't have telephony system, they use us, right? Or maybe they have another tool stack like a CRM, Salesforce, or something like that. They need to integrate, and these are the main components. If this is done well, it should start actually delivering the value. Yeah, you can go to production.
I was wondering a little bit while you talked, what breaks at 1,000 parallel calls, speech quality, latency spikes, rate limits, integration quotas, and how do you harden for peak season? I mean, especially if you are into some kind of business that has a rush towards the end of the year, towards Black Friday, e-commerce, Christmas is what I had in mind. How do you prepare for something like that?
That's a very, very good question. And this was honestly at the very beginning, this was our main problem. This was like when we started scaling, because and 1,000 calls are fine. It's nothing. We're talking about millions. This is
okay. Totally fine with me. Let's talk about millions.
That's where real challenges start happening. And honestly, one of the first challenges we had was the capacity, right? So we had to get more and more like hosting capacity, right? So that we could digest all this processing, right? And so this is one thing. You have to make sure that your infrastructure, right, the cloud and the hosting, it's you already have that capacity. It's set for scale, right? And for us, because we grew so fast, we were not very much prepared in the beginning. We never thought we would go in few months, basically from hundreds to hundreds, thousands, or million calls. And this is was the very first challenge, like architectural challenge, right? So the number of calls per se didn't affect, in our case, like the latency directly. But if something else affected latency, reversely, that would mean that million calls were affected by that, right? So the stakes are becoming very, very high. So you cannot operate as a startup anymore, right? By pushing things and version 1, you don't care if anything broken. So suddenly you have to graduate very, very quickly to actually having a high performing, high reliability, like 999s, 49s, at some point 59 reliability company, which is actually, to be very frank, is a huge challenge, because you just have an engineering team of like 8 people, and now we're like 30 plus, right, engineering team, and you have to professionalize like overnight. And that was like a very big challenge for us, and it's very hard. This is something it even in the era of AI hasn't changed. It takes time to hire your team. It takes time to build your culture. It takes time to have quality people. And that's was a big challenge to get there. So to summarize, basically, one thing is you have to make sure that the architecture is there, but you also have to build a very world-class team, because your business processes, right, your engineering processes are going to affect, right? If you push something to deployment and it affects even like minimally one like latency or etc., it means for million calls at the same time. And then you will have too many fires. You will not be able to extinguish, right? So you have to build a very strong system to ensure that reliability. Yeah.
Getting professional, getting a big team very fast, always a challenge. As you said, you can't change it simply by applying AI. In the founders world, you'll share some internal evaluation dashboard used for memory, co-KPIs, guardrails, and so on and so forth. Find the links down here in the show notes to subscribe to our premium offering, the Founders Vault. Just $5 a month. Let us go a little bit from what is now working into the future outlook. What's next for voice-to-voice LLMs, reasoning, and on-device, on-edge, and where does memory evolve, like agent teams, shared state, auto-summaries?
So I would say like the near future in terms of like roadmap is clear. Longer than that, it's always hard in AI. It's always like basically, I think humans have been historically terrible at predicting the future, right?
I usually say in such cases in our interviews, I know predictions are hard, especially concerning the future, right? But you're here and we'll give it a shot.
Yes, no, I'm happy to share. Actually, I am one of the guys who always has an opinion on these things. But humans are generally, and like, for example, everyone 2023 was saying AGI, etc. And now it's like very, very different. So look, so the near future, I think at least for our market, right, for our product, it's all about basically reliability, quality, ensuring outcomes, like deterministic outcomes, right? So that reducing I would say the chance, right? Reducing the chance in the agentic space, right? So that the ROE is evident. And there are many things, right? It's there you build architectural stuff around your infrastructure, but you also build features. And this is the Bell framework, which we will announce very soon. And many similar features, right? You build now, and on the more, I would say, down the road, right, in the future, I think I'm really curious, kind of what's the next step from LLMs, because basically products like Synthflow very much depend on that, right? Like what's next in that, what's next in speech to text. And there is also like the voice to voice model from OpenAI, right? The reason we're not using that because it's like commercially not viable yet. It's very expensive, and it also has more limitations when it comes to actually agent doing tasks, right? The RPA part. So it will be, I think, there soon. So that's one of my predictions is that voice to voice, and the voice to voice is amazing experience, right? And you have many of the problems that you have with the current orchestration, you don't have it with there. So I'm pretty sure this will be also state of the art very soon. I think that's an interesting part. I think we'll see also like huge progress in terms of long format. So right now, AI is very good for shorter conversations, right? And finishing something and doing a job, like, I don't know, 1 minute conversation, customer support, right? But what about 1 hour conversations, right? Because the longer these conversations go, the harder it actually for AI to stay on track. So I think that's an interesting to see like what's on the long format part. And of course, like the complexity of the tasks. The tasks that AI does nowadays are relatively simple or straightforward, right? Like talk, capture something, share something, update something somewhere, right? But going forward, maybe it can like do something end to end, right? Go and book and I don't know, follow and like really complicated tasks, I would say. This is like what I would expect this to develop. However, it's not going to be like an overnight transition. It's going to take a few years at least. Yeah.
Not only that people don't shy away from interacting when somebody calls, hey, this is a booking service, and you call a restaurant, right? In 24 months, what percentage of customer calls will AI handle end to end in regulated industries, and what will still require a human?
Look, I don't think AI is going to completely replace humans. I keep saying this everywhere, that AI is going to augment humans. I don't think humans will be out of the loop in the near future. That's not going to happen, because I don't see humans trusting, like, I would say, not only trusting, but AI just doesn't have that capacity to do very complicated things, right? And very long, I would say, RPAs, automations, right? So I think in the next 5 years, so look, for some cases, it's going to be 100%. To answer your question, it's going to be 100% of the calls. Like, for example, for transfers, routings, FAQ, first line of defense, I think it's going to be 100% is going to be done by AI. For some cases, more complicated ones, right, processing, etc., maybe even on the governmental side, I think it's going to be way slower, right? Like, I don't know, let's say taxes or this kind of areas. I don't see it like adopting very quickly. That said, regulated spaces also, like, we already see like crazy adoption in healthcare and financial institutions. Despite, you just need to be compliant, right? You have to have everything. Like, you have to have HIPAA compliance, you have to have pen tests, right? You have to ensure and you're signing SLAs and this kind of things with the customers, right? If the state of the technology is there that you can guarantee that, for example, with visual graph builders, then basically if the AI works for 10% of the calls, there is no reason for them not to deploy it for 100% of the calls, right? And I think it's going to be very different case by case, like use case from use case. For some use cases, it's going to be 100%. For some, probably very low, not even 1%. Yeah.
A little bit of contrarian view when we go close toward the end. By the way, you're holding up pretty well, and we're recording for no more than an hour now. I was wondering, what's an overrated metric or myth in an AI contact center deployment that teams should ignore, or that it's still missing the return on investment?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So, look, I don't think that the classical ones like CSAT or like things like deflection rate or average resolution time or time to answer, these things are actually very important, right? And they do matter, right? I think one thing that I always look at, but I don't care. So in a sense, is that is the subjective feedback that we get very often. So for example, sometimes people say, "Oh, it was too robotic," and of course, at this stage, it still could be some elements of that. It's an AI, and also I tell to all my customers, like, you have to disclose that it's an AI. It's not built to lie to people that it's human. That's a bad practice, right? So when humans talk with AI, they should know they're talking to AI, and they should have the right expectations, right? If someone tells me, it didn't feel like it was a bit robotic, I think that's fine. Of course, as long as you know it's an AI, as long as it does the job for you, right? You have a good experience, right? Better than the IVR trees or etc. of the past. We're making a huge progress, right, as a humanity in that area. And this is like, for me, I wouldn't care that much about that. We're getting that subjective feedback that it's, because first of all, it doesn't have to be exactly like humans, right? As long as your experience is good, you're talking to AI and your problem is solved on the phone, what's the problem, right? So that's kind of what I look right now. And I'm very, very tolerant in the subjectivity towards AI. And I just think we just need more time as humans to actually get there to say, okay, like this is where we are, right? Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Bottom line, the slower developing part is not AI, it's the humans in the loop. Yeah. For our audience, I was wondering, should AI remember you across calls if it improves your service? Yes or no? Tell us why in the comments. An advice for founders and CX leaders. What's your 3-step guide here? And can you share some advice for our listeners who are mostly founders and executives from this plan?
Yes. So, look, so I would share some advice on a bit like higher level, right? So I think one thing that it's very different right now in the AI era compared to before AI is that it's very stressful. I don't think that founders have been under such a pressure and stress ever in the history of startups, because things are moving basically on weekly basis. Like every week, every day, something new is happening. Like I wake up in the morning, I look into my phone, someone new model is out there. Someone released that. Someone released this. This is changing. OpenAI is doing that and does. So I think like these skills, navigating skills, right, filtering out through the noise is a superpower at this stage. And founders need to learn actually not to get too distracted and too stressed down by the noise. It's going to be there for a while. It's a new technology. We're experiencing an immense progress as a humanity. I think this is already way bigger than internet, right? What's happening right now. We have never seen this type of progress, right? And on a weekly basis. So really understanding and focusing on value, building business is harder right now, because there are many shiny things, right? You always confront these decisions. Oh, I know this new model came. Shall I use this and that, or do I go this way? What about this, right? And I think like being very close to the customers, very, very close to the customers, and focusing on building long-term value for them, for your customers, is the key. This is my view. This is what I will highly recommend based on my own experience in the last 3 years, I would say. Yeah.
3 more questions for you. Closing bold insights. Finish this sentence. In 3 years, voice AI with memory will be the default interface
it will be default interface for contact centers, both external and internal. It means external BPOs, right? Contact center as a service, and internal contact centers for insurance, financial institutions, companies, because we already see the ROE and the case is very clear. It's just a matter of time until enterprises start deploying and adopting this in their companies.
Mm-hmm. And 2 closing questions. Are you open to talk to new investors?
Yes, definitely. Always happy to. I think the best format is always, I say it, coffee chat. Yeah.
Yes, we link your LinkedIn profile down here in the show notes, and I do believe every investor that has been sticking around for over an hour, they'll be interested to talk to you. And of course, you're looking for hiring talented employees?
Yes, always, right. And we're hiring on a rolling basis. So we are not a company that just fills in gaps. We always look for exceptional talent, whether it's AI engineering, voice AI, or also commercial roles, right? Sales, solutions engineering, forward deployed engineers. We're always open on a rolling basis for exceptional talent. And we guarantee you and promise you also like an exceptional environment to work on cool things and grow as a professional.
Awesome. Hakob, it was such a pleasure having you here. For our premium subscribers, we'll be back shortly with the Founders Vault. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
That's all, folks. Find more news, streams, events, and interviews at www.startuprad.io. Remember, sharing is caring.